in the last year, we've started investing in agents. And agents for us are these sort of digital coworkers, is the mental model that we have for them, because they are working in the background for you. They have what we call an observation loop, where they're, based on their capabilities, looking for things changing, things to do. They're being proactive in the background. And if they find work to do, they will trigger work streams. And those work streams may have steps where an approval is needed.
In today's episode, we're looking at the front-to-back workflow for investment managers by speaking to Ridgeline, a platform that automates and supports the system of record for managers. With me today is Ridgeline's head of artificial intelligence, Alex Benke. Alex, welcome to the pod.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having me.
Alex, why don't you start by telling the audience a bit about Ridgeline, who they are, what they do, and who their clients are?
Yeah, of course. So Ridgeline was founded by Dave Duffield, who also founded PeopleSoft and Workday, and is an expert in building enterprise systems, probably one of the foremost experts in the world in this. And he decided to take that expertise and bring it to the asset and wealth management industry and build a truly back-to-front system from the ground up in order to support the use cases that asset managers have. This is a true front to back, across front, middle, and back office. It's not a patchwork of systems as a lot of our competitors market themselves as. And it is born in the cloud, which enables it for AI.
And in terms of your client base, is it traditional long-only managers? Is it complex hedge funds? Is it mutual funds? Who do you target there?
We target asset institutional managers as well as wealth managers on the larger side of things. Don't target hedge funds today. We're not long only. We support pretty much every asset class, but across both asset and wealth managers.
Brilliant. And I introduced you as the head of artificial intelligence, obviously a very relevant role in today's world of AI. But why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and what you did to get to where you are today?
Yeah, happy to do that. So I've been building financial software systems for almost 25 years. I started my career at JP Morgan, spending about 10 years building on some of the biggest systems in the world, but internally for them. I then was one of the early employees at Betterment, the original robo-advisor, which was, of course, a consumer-facing product. So a lot of focus on reinventing the user experience, the design around the investment process for an individual. And then the last 7 years have been at Ridgeline, where I've taken those two backgrounds in terms of large systems as well as that user-centered design and apply that into a enterprise-based solution for asset and wealth managers. And in the last 3 years, as we realized the opportunity that AI could bring to this back-to-front system that we were building, have been very focused on building our capabilities in AI within that ecosystem in Ridgeline.
And you mentioned Ridgeline is a full back-to-front provider. For those that aren't aware, what would be some of the core services when you say front to back? What does that actually involve in terms of functions provided?
Yeah, of course. So everything from order management and portfolio management, allocating portfolios, doing block trades, that sort of thing. We're also a double entry portfolio accounting system. And as part of that, do things like reporting, billing, a billing solution, as well as a CRM. So the CRM is also deeply embedded inside of Ridgeline and can work across all those pieces. Of course, we support trade compliance as well as part of trading and kind of anything that those different roles would need to do in their jobs.
Now, moving into AI then, been around for about 3 years. Can you walk us through how your journey or how Ridgeline's journey with AI started? How did you approach it? Where did you first start looking at applying it? And what was the overall process when looking at AI?
We were thinking about AI from the very beginning, back then it was more of the machine learning type AI versus generative AI. And then once ChatGPT 3 basically came out, we recognized that generative AI had a tremendous opportunity in a number of areas inside of Ridgeline. And we basically started experimenting in what we could build in the product. We spent a lot of time and continue to spend a lot of time with our customers, talking through their pain points and trying to find ways to apply it to help solve their problems. At the same time, we've been on our internal journey with AI, as many companies have, and are leaning heavily into all the tools from software engineering tools because we are a software company, as well as tools like ChatGPT, where we're allowing any employees to use them as part of their job. We've done this from a very responsible AI stance from the beginning. In fact, when ChatGPT first came out, we started by blocking it for employees because of the risks around data leakage, training, customer data getting into the wrong places. And from there, formed a responsible AI committee and have used that to set out the policies, procedures, tracking, all the kind of guardrails around those capabilities. So that committee that I'm part of, along with our legal and compliance team, still exists today, is very active. We review every single feature before it gets built into Ridgeline, and we review every single use case internally that our employees have for AI to make sure that the controls are being followed and are in place in order to protect our customers' data.
And I'm always curious how a company starts AI internally with their people and organization, because there's different processes. Did you start with an innovation lab? Did you start with centers of excellence and champions? Or did you go a whole of organization, everyone at once? What was the approach there?
What we've seen is a set of champions, if you will, or early adopters who just sort of rose up and just started prototyping. I'm one of those people and have been part of what we call a tiger team internally, which has done early evaluation of tools, has been a core part of driving us forward in terms of getting the tools approved and implemented and people trained on them. So it's really helpful to kind of recognize who the people are inside of a firm, who are those early adopters and are really interested in tinkering and looking at tools. I think that's true of any company. We're a software company, but if you're a asset manager, wealth manager, you're going to tend to have people from all walks of life, not necessarily technical people or a particular age, who are just tinkerers and have that interest and really lean into the tools. And so the question is, how do you make sure you kind of pave the road for them so that they can experiment, but also make sure that we're following the controls and procedures that you have to do that safely.
Now, you mentioned starting with AI tools internally, and I'd like to come back to that at some stage, but looking at the external side of it, what was some of the first AI tools you rolled out to your clients then?
Yeah, good question. The first was more of a assistant, what we call an assistant, which you can think of like a ChatGPT inside of Ridgeline and hooked up to all the data inside of Ridgeline. So very common use case that many companies started out with. We actually started by doing a RAG search on all of our help documentation. So it knew how to use Ridgeline. And because we are in active growth stage and onboarding many, many new customers to Ridgeline, it was a great sort of safe way to start because it didn't involve customer data. It was just our help docs. And so you could just go in and say, how do I do this? And it just tells you how to do that inside of Ridgeline. Since then, we've been marching towards expanding the capabilities that has. So allowing it to have access to more types of data, allowing it to do more for the user, of course, with approvals in the loop there, but just expanding that capability. So that's the human-driven version where you go, you ask a question, you chat, you do your work.
Effectively, a knowledge management agent trained on the material you put through it.
Yes, exactly. In the last year, we've started investing in agents, and agents for us are these sort of digital coworkers, is the mental model that we have for them, because they are working in the background for you. They have what we call an observation loop, where they're, based on their capabilities, looking for things changing, things to do. They're being proactive in the background. And if they find work to do, they will trigger work streams, and those work streams may have steps where an approval is needed, where it'll do several steps and then stop and then wait for approval in order to move forward to the next thing. So in the agentic area, we have a number of agents so far. One is in trade compliance. In trade compliance, a compliance officer or somebody who's reviewing your pre or post trade compliance is basically doing a lot of homework. They see a violation come through inside our trade compliance system and they need to know why. And so they start to look at their email, they start to call somebody over, they start to look at historical violations, they look at the audit trail of how a rule might have changed through time. And all that information can actually be pre-gathered by an agent in order to just summarize and pull it back for them so that they don't have to open 5 tabs and call people and all those things. And so the power of our system and being this back to front is that we actually have access to the CRM, all the emails that are related to this client or this violation. We have access to the audit trail. We have access to the changes that have been made to transactions related to it or not related to it that we need to bring in. And so the agent just synthesizes all of that and puts it in front of the compliance officer so that they can make a faster decision.
And because you have all the data in your system, you've got, as you mentioned, full audit, transparency, explainability, where it came from, the logic of it, etc.
Exactly. And the agent links back to all that data so you can get to it easily as well.
Excellent. That's a brilliant example. I'd love to maybe touch on one or two more examples. And I noticed on your website, you've got a reconciliation agent, and every manager has to deal with reconciliation. So I'd love to understand how that agent works, what it does, and some of the benefits it's given your clients already.
Yeah, of course. I think that's our most long sought after and most popular agent at this point. It's still early days. We launched it late last year and have a number of customers testing it currently. But they're using it for their reconciliations today. It basically works in 2 phases. One is that it automatically buckets all of the breaks that are coming in for a particular day based on the type, the class, the reason, anything that will help them bulk process those breaks. So it's trying to simplify the job by grouping things, which is kind of what a user would do anyway by doing sorts and filters and kind of massaging the data. So it starts by doing that. And then it looks at, for each particular situation, it looks at the history of how that type of violation is typically, or a break is typically dealt with. So it looks at the historical actions that someone using the reconciliation tool has done in the past and applies that logic to make a recommendation to the user. And with one button click, if they agree with the recommendation, they can process all of those breaks. So that's the main benefits in how it works. It just speeds up their process. There's still a human driver in that process and kind of going through and reviewing everything, but it just, because of the kind of bulking process and the recognition of the history, you don't need to be as much of a of an expert on all the process you that has been followed in the past.
Now, when it comes to investment management, often you are dealing with regulated products. How do you approach then the topics of security, permission, compliance, auditability? How do you approach that in your design of your AI and your data structure?
Yeah, this is a great question and kind of goes back to our founder and the best practices around building enterprise software. Things like security, entitlements, permissions, access controls, these are part and parcel to the entire system, built in from the ground up across. So they are things that we benefit from when we're building an agent. So an agent has the same kind of permission profile capability as any of the users. They're like another user inside of Ridgeline. And you can make our agents respect the setup of the user who's seeing their output. So for example, portfolio access controls. We have this capability where you can make it so that some users cannot see all portfolios. So if an agent is working on behalf of a user and that user can't see the portfolios, it will not show them that, even if it has access to do that. So it's taking the same kind of guardrails constructs that we have built into the base system and applying that in its work, just like any user who would be using it. And that's a real large value prop of AI that is embedded directly into your platform and into your system. If you are applying AI outside of the system, say you're sucking all your data out of Ridgeline into a data warehouse, which you can do. We have APIs. You could do that if you wanted to. Once you do that, now all of a sudden you've lost all the permissions and access and things that have been pre-configured and set. And so you have to effectively re-implement that in your agentic logic or any downstream systems. So and it starts to get ugly fast once the data is outside of the main system. So it's both a value prop to have it in it, to have AI built directly in the system, and it's a lot safer, meets compliance controls and things more easily.
Obviously, there's different agents that you would have across different workflows. And so a client may have multiple agents, multiple workflows running. How do your clients look or oversee those agents? How do they see what's going on, what's completed, what's outstanding, what requires action?
Yeah, we have a number of different ways of doing that. We have a flexible dashboard capability in Ridgeline for any of the data that you might want to see. So you can configure those, and that can be powered by the agent workstream status or anything that's waiting for user action. So a common dashboard will be, action required for a particular role. If you're in the relationship management group and are looking at the output of a CRM agent, then you might have a dashboard that filters down just to see that, and you'll see the kind of pings coming in when that is needed. We also have a notification system that's built and works directly inside of Ridgeline that can either ping you inside of Ridgeline or send emails to you. So when a human is needed, that's another way to kind of see the status and see when you're required. And then lastly, we have the audit trails of what's happening with an agent or with the chat. So an admin type user could go in and see what has it done recently, what was this user asking of the assistant, and how did it respond? Do we like how it responded? All of that. So from the back end and controls and making sure that AI is working well for you, we have that as well.
If you're enjoying the Fund AI pod, the best way to support the show is simple: hit subscribe. It really helps a new channel like this grow, and it allows us to attract even more interesting guests from across the funds industry. Head to www.thefundaipod.com to catch past episodes, nominate future guests, or explore ways that we can work together, whether that's consulting, sponsorship, speaking, or collaboration. Now back to the episode. Now, we went through a few examples of agents, such as reconciliation agent, pre and post trade compliance, or compliance agent. What would be some other popular agents within your platform that your clients are using?
Another one is in the CRM space. This is one that's in active development, but it basically reads client communications, meeting notes, call notes, all these things that are inside of Ridgeline, and then helps the servicing team decide whether there is work to happen. The latest version of this will tee up or recommend a workflow. So if a customer calls and asks for a withdrawal, there is a whole workflow that goes around that in order to raise cash in the portfolio management team, in order to confirm that this should happen potentially with a number of people. And Ridgeline's workflow engine would have that workflow implemented, and the agent will read the email and say, "Oh, we need to start this workflow. Click here to start it," and it pre-populates the form with the amount and other details about that to move it down through the flow. And that agent actually can be kicked off inside of Ridgeline. We now also have an Outlook plugin. So while you're staring at the email, it wakes up behind the scenes in a side panel and says, "This looks like you need to start the withdrawal workflow." And you can do it directly from there. And it's authenticated with Ridgeline and starts it in Ridgeline.
Now, obviously, a workflow like that, you would have a human in the loop who would look to approve that capital call statement to go out or whatever it may be in terms of steps. How do you address potential hallucination issues with using AI in terms of populating those fields if it was to misread it or pull the wrong data in? How do you reduce hallucination, and then just in general, what is your approach to minimizing hallucination?
It starts with our testing process. So we do pretty extensive testing in order to make sure that in kind of contrived synthetic scenarios that we are not hallucinating, that success rates are high. We have found that when you control the temperature settings of models, when you use the right model, when you control the context properly, you tend to be able to minimize hallucinations pretty well. In the in front of the user, though, they're sort of the last mile in confirming that things are happening, and agents are not in Ridgeline taking any steps without a user looking at it. So even if we pre-fill a form for you based on the email for that capital call, it's going to show you the form with the fields filled out, and then you have to press submit in order to actually kick it off. So it moves from that non-deterministic state where it did the interpretation and the inference to the deterministic state where it starts the workflow based on a user. So it's really just assistive to the human who would have been doing that process anyway.
Looking under the hood of your agents, is it run by one particular model? Are you model agnostic, or have you even created your own model? How does that work?
We decided early on that creating our own model was not the best path. I think that was a wise choice looking back on it a few years because of how fast the models have gotten better without us doing anything or paying anything. We potentially will build models in the future as we need them, but so far we haven't needed them. We do work with OpenAI as our main partner for models, but have recently onboarded Anthropic as well. So all the AI today in Ridgeline is powered by OpenAI. Anthropic is there in case we have use cases that where their model is better. So we will evaluate between the two and see which is more successful, or for a fallback, because we have found that there are times when the model providers go down. I think anybody who's used them has seen that they'll get really slow, or will just go down. And obviously, we can't have that in a mission critical system like Ridgeline. So we want to have a fallback to another model provider. So that's something we're just ramping, but will be released as a capability this year.
And are you consuming other external data? And if so, are you using MCP? Are you using APIs? How does that work?
All of our AI today is based on data that's inside of Ridgeline. We are working to bring in other third-party sources of data. So part of our strategy is we recognize that Ridgeline doesn't have literally all data that an asset manager might have. Obviously, we're not a market data provider. We're not a research data provider. We do integrate with those types of sources, and we want to make it easier to bring in that data, that context into Ridgeline, whether it's bringing it into the assistant. We have a thing we've been testing which allows you to query a Snowflake warehouse that you have, to be able to just ask a question in the same way you would of Ridgeline data of your Snowflake data, and have that respond. And you effectively can then join data across those sources directly inside the LLM, which is pretty powerful. We also have things like news sources that we've been prototyping, where you could ask, if you're walking into a client meeting and you want to ask for some updates about the holdings that they have. We have the data about the holdings. We can go out to a news source and filter down by just the things that are relevant, so you can walk uh, in a smart way, having talking points for the end investor.
And last question, looking under the hood, is you obviously mentioned that you use coding copilots, being a technology firm. I would love to know two things. One is, what tools are you using? And then two, if you have any anecdotal, any stories around benefits to the engineers compared to, say, 4 years ago. Are they 50% more output, 2x, 3x? Anything interesting like that?
Yeah. So tool wise, we started with GitHub Copilot, and we still have that around as a tool. I think we've shifted in the last 6 months to Cursor as a tool, often using the Claude models behind Cursor. In the last few weeks, or basically since December, I think Claude Code has become a tool of choice, and many engineers are using Claude Code. That is quickly ramping both at Ridgeline and in the world, I think. And we're also increasingly using background agents like Codex that kind of will review a PR, for example, a pull request of proposed code before it even hits a human for review, and it'll point out bugs before it gets to a human review, and that's started to show some success as well. I think our internal stat so far is about 30% of code is written by AI. Of course, 100% is reviewed by humans, and goes through our quality testing processes. But that's a big change since a year ago even.
From an adoption perspective, how have your clients reacted to the agents? What's the uptake been? What would be some of the questions or challenges you may get before they look to use it?
Yeah, I think there is certainly a ton of excitement about the capabilities of AI and the promise of it. We do a lot of discussions with our customers and their own responsible AI boards or model review committees or compliance folks, teaching them about how we think about and how the capabilities in Ridgeline actually work. So they're very measured. Not all firms are that way. We have what we call design partners who work very closely with us, and they're the early adopters who take the first beta version of something and are very helpful in giving feedback. So we see a wide range of acceptance of things. Again, every firm realizes AI is here to stay at this point. That wasn't the case 2 years ago, but is definitely the case now. And our data controls and security safeguards and things have been an essential part of the getting the checkbox from the compliance teams that it's okay to turn on AI in Ridgeline. But there is still a learning curve, just like there is for all of us. And asset managers are more, they've been with their systems for decades, they've been with their processes for decades. And to really lean into AI, it does take kind of rethinking your processes. It takes, consolidating your data into a system like Ridgeline. It takes popping the hood on a workflow that you might have gone through that involves some export to Excel and a bunch of other manual steps, and really getting that into the actual system so that you can truly benefit from the technology. And so we do work with our customers to help move along that curve, but it's not an overnight thing.
And when you are rolling out new AI capabilities or a new agent, how do you think about measuring the success of it? How much is revenue uptake, client usage, risk reduction, efficiency? How do you measure a success of AI capability rollout?
Good question. And this is an interesting one for both our internal tools as well as the ones that we're putting into our product, because it is hard to measure outcomes in a lot of ways. So we start by tracking usage. Are the tools being used? Are people turning them on? Are they using them every week? So metrics like weekly active users are things that we look at. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting value or positive outcomes from them. And that is something we're looking to ramp up how we measure and how we do that. Things like, voting buttons we don't yet have in Ridgeline to thumbs down a response, but that is going to be a key part. We're just now adding what we call observability that's powered by an LLM. So every single thread that comes through gets a observability evaluation call that checks whether that response was good or bad on the fly in real time. So that's another way to measure outcomes. But ultimately, it's about, did your recon go faster? Did you have less breaks that humans had to see? Did you have higher client satisfaction? All these kind of business outcomes, I think, is where we need to get to. It's about making sure we capture the data and have innovative ways to kind of measure those things like time savings and business value.
And as you build new AI products, how do you balance innovation, so getting new capabilities out there, with control, reliability, trust?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, like I mentioned, the types of controls that we've built into the base platform have been an essential part of it because it guarantees that any new AI that gets built on top of it follows all of those things. We have 300 plus engineers at Ridgeline. All of them have ideas and products that they want to build surrounding AI. They don't have to start from scratch and figure out how to do those controls and build those in. So that's really an essential part of making sure that we're continually building in a very controlled way. The other part is choosing to use AI for the right use case. There are always going to be things where the LLM is just a bad solution for that particular thing, where you're going to trigger additional hallucinations, or where the stakes are so high that even a 95% success rate is not good enough. And those are the places where, from a product standpoint, when we're thinking with our product team about where to apply AI to solve a customer problem, we will or will not try to apply it. We might do experiments and do checks to see whether the accuracy makes sense and that kind of thing. We do a lot of prototyping of features, but we never want to release something. We're not automating trading or anything like that because the risk is just too high of mistakes.
No, that makes sense. And then I'd love to look forward 1 or 2 years, especially with the speed at which AI develops. Where do you see the investment management workflow going with the rollout of AI, the increased adoption? What does the future of investment management workflow look like looking forward?
Honestly, like any knowledge workers today, I think it kind of goes up the value chain and into the things that you want the human, who's always going to be smarter than the model, applying their brain power towards. So in a lot of cases, that's human to human connection type things like relationship management. If you can spend more time with the right people in your client base, if you can treat all your clients in the same way with the highest level of service, like that is going to help you grow. That is going to help you just have a stickier client base. I think the work of an operations team moves more to a kind of conductor, right? Where you're watching all the things happening, you're using your intuition about where problems are happening, you're using the outputs of armies of agents that are doing the grunt work behind the scenes. They're doing way more checking and reviewing and surfacing of things than you could ever do with your human team size. And that one improves the success rates that you have, less errors, so more success, and it also will allow you to grow more and personalize more because you're not stuck with bespoke. Right now, you might not take on a bespoke type of a process in an operations team, or you might avoid going into a new market or bringing on a new asset class because the operational processes are too onerous in order to do that. And the bringing in of the AI capabilities really unblocks and allows you to start to say yes to some of those things that are ultimately avenues of growth, even for an operations team that can now kind of do more than they could do in the past.
So we're talking about adoption there. If you have a client that has heard the story about AI, they know they need to use it, they're on your platform, they come to you and say, I would like to start using your agents. Can you walk us through what that journey looks like for the client?
Yeah, of course. One of our early adopter clients that tries out every single new AI feature was one of the early users of the recon agent for this one example. And today they're getting a lot of value out of that now that they've onboarded. But it took them a bunch of weeks, maybe even a couple of months, to actually transition their process onto it and to fully trust that the process is working. And we thought of that when we built this agent. We have a way to see your recon process in a manual way, and then we have the AI assisted way. It's two different tabs. You can switch back and forth between them. And this ability to kind of go back to comfort zone and confirm things has been really critical to the uh, the adoption of it.
And what was some of the main benefits that they got from it then?
I mean, the main benefits are just time savings in the process. I think when you're able to start your trading earlier for the day, that's a big value for everyone at the firm. And if you don't have to start your recon as early, but still finish early, they're both saving time, and they're also more confident that the process is going well.
A manager that comes to you looking to adopt AI or the tools that you offer, what would be some of the advice that you would give to them in terms of their first steps to get started?
Well, the first step, if they're a prospect, is getting on to Ridgeline, because that process is where they're going to have to look at all their data, decide which pieces move over, rethink how their workflows work in this cloud native world where you're not swivel chairing between systems. So there's a implementation process that every customer goes through in order to get onto Ridgeline. They usually think of their AI steps as the follow-on phase, because the first phase in doing the replace of all the systems is a journey that they have to go through. But it does put them into a world where AI is now possible to successfully apply to their business in a core way, instead of it being a sort of bolt-on where they just kind of tie it into 5 different systems and have MCP servers all over the place and have all that, the data control issues that I was talking about earlier. First, it's get on to Ridgeline, onto the single platform where your data is in one place. Then it's look at the capabilities and how your flows work and how those parts of the AI that we offer today can help. So if CRM is core to one of your workflows, we can look at the current CM agent or different ideas that people have. We are also in active build mode on all of these things. So again, we're literally talking to customers every week about their ideas and continually building onto these capabilities. So I treat every call that we have with customers as a way to gather those pain points and figure out ways to solve their problems with it. So it's both that onboarding and using what we have, and also the iteration process afterwards.
Brilliant, Alex. We've covered a lot today. And so I'll probably wrap it up now with 2 quick questions. The first is, you're head of AI. And as we know, AI moves at a near exponential speed. How do you stay current on AI developments?
That's a great question. As head of AI, you might imagine, I'm actually using AI for that. About a year and a half ago, I wrote an agent that reads my email and looks for all the AI related reading and newsletters. It synthesizes it for me, and every morning at 7 a.m. I get a kind of summary of all the stuff that's going on since overnight in the last 24 hours. So that's really taken, I was reading 10% of those things previous to building this, and now I can get the short summary and everything with links, and then I can, in a curated way, kind of drill in to the longer form things that I decide to read. So that's been one of the main ways that I'm on top of all of the things that are happening. I, of course, love podcasts as well, especially the ones where they're actually popping the hood on a process and screen sharing and showing how something works. I learn a ton from other people and kind of how they do things, and then I can map that back to our problems and see if there's ways to integrate those ideas.
Excellent. I love that you live what you breathe, or breathe what you live. And then this last question is, if people want to learn more about Ridgeline, where do they go in terms of website and any socials that you may have?
We have a big LinkedIn presence. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today. It was very insightful, and your platform sounds very interesting. So people should go check it out. Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate you having me. Take care.
At 𝐥𝐬𝐯, we know funds, we know Microsoft, we know AI, and we move fast. Book a 1-hour sprint audit at 𝐥𝐬𝐯.io, and we'll identify 3 quick AI or automation wins to build immediate momentum for your firm.